Welcome to your awakening. Please take calm as your reality is adjusted.
Whee! Yeah, it's on. Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, etc., etc. Sorry, I was just looking to get the. Can I get the pop-out chat? Can I get the pop-out chat? Yes, I can. Cool. I'll show that in a minute. Yes. Good morning, global gulag. All by myself. I still say no to your vaccine bullshit. Hello, everyone in the chat room. Right, let me try doing it this way. And this should hopefully work. Will it? Yay! I thought this way hopefully makes it a bit more obvious when I'm interacting with the chat. And I was curious to compare how fast the StreamYard chat updates compared to the actual YouTube chat box. So we can compare how well it keeps up, because I mentioned many times about how the chat box loses its cache every so often. So we end up not being able to like scroll back up the chat and say hello to everyone or interact with comments that people have posted earlier on or whatever. So I thought this time, yeah, I might as well try using the pop-out chat and see if it shows up any better. Oh, I was just moving my screen around so I can see a bit better. Yes, it's just me this evening for now. Everyone else jumped out, which is why I was like, did I fart or something? What's going on? Not everybody's just gone. And I did say to don't worry, if you don't want to stick around, that's no problem. Society of the Spectacle says hello. He might still be in the chat room, I think. He said he had a few more minutes left in the internet cafe. The curfew, just as a side note of interest, the curfew over in Spain, where he's in Barcelona, has now been dropped. But most of the businesses are still not gone back to their old opening hours that they used to have. He said so far the internet cafe guys only added like half an hour, 30 minutes extra onto his opening time. So basically the curfew has been pushed back 30 minutes. But yeah, he says hello. He's doing great. He's been doing some good stuff, working with people on a little grow project, a plot a ground that they're growing various stuff on. So, you know, he's been hard at it, out in the sun. I hope you've been enjoying the sun. Oh, I'm going to scroll back up. Why does it say top chat? That's the shit he is. Top chat. We want the live chat, please. Thank you. All right, hello to everyone in the chat so far. Lynn Anderson, hello. Glad you got the cake ready and enjoying yourself in the garden. Good stuff. Barry Truth, hello. Yes, unfortunately, only the mods can post links and whatever with the way YouTube chat works now. But you can always, you know, reword it, take the dots out, or write dots and write what, you know, HTTP, whatever. I think most people know how to make use of the address bar on their browser now, so you don't have to put in things like HTTPS, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, if you can, do it that way. Or as Taz has put the link in, I'm guessing that's the one you were talking about, not on the Beeb channel. So yeah, we'll figure it out in the end one way or the other. Simon Boyle, hello, thanks for joining us. And the dot is in the room. Hello, mate. Roscoe Pico Train. Hello. Nolan Pete's in the chat. I'm scrolling. Lion Share. Hello, mate. Thanks for joining in. And Sidefish. I don't know. Shall I say hello to you, or will you tell me to stop it again? Thanks for joining in the chat. And Kendo. Hello, mate. Hope you're well. New Being. Good evening. Hello, thanks for joining in. Farah, happy birthday. Belated happy birthday, but happy birthday. Hope you're still having a good time. I'm sure I'm missing. Did I? No, I'm just getting one of those image dyslexia, thinking I've seen a different avatar. It's not image dyslexia, is there such a thing? And there is now. Oh, see, chat jumping around now. So this is what it does. It like jumps up and down and it clears its cache and stuff like that, which is why sometimes it gets a bit awkward. Darren Allen, hello. Thanks for joining in. And the Rebel, hello. So I end up like scrolling up, down, trying to make sure I'm not missed one. So safe, hello. I can't stop coughing again today, so apologies in advance. Oshamo69, thanks for joining in. And Man Bear Pig, hello, this is for real, y'all. Yes, this is definitely for real. They are 2 weeks to flatten the uprising. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Remember that scene from Total Recall where he's wearing the mask of the old woman? I say older woman. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to flatten the uprising. 2 week, WEAK, as I put in the subtitle this week. I will keep coming back to the chat. I'll leave it on the screen for now, but I want to interact with the chat more than anything tonight. I'm going to mention a few things, but it's a bank holiday here in the UK. It's a slave day holiday. So for all the slaves out there, you've been officially allowed to have a day off work, for most people anyway. Obviously there's a few people who still have to go into the drudgery, but yeah, it's a bank holiday, so everybody's relaxed. People have been out enjoying the sunshine because there's been fantastic weather the past few days, certainly for at least the past 3 days since Saturday with the big protest march, which is really one of the main things I want to mention tonight. Just talking about that, I'll show some images, but also to mention a few of the things going through the week that have just been piling up as I've been making the argument over the last several weeks now. They have lost control of the narrative. It's not that they're starting to lose control anymore. That was true several weeks ago when things started to, I think, become more apparent for a lot more of the public, as they kept insisting, as in they, the government, the state, the agencies, whatever, they kept insisting that everyone has to get the vaccine one way or the other. And even though they never directly state that their goal is zero COVID, that magic unicorn impossibility that they're going to achieve absolutely zero COVID throughout the entire country, even though they've never directly said that, it's become pretty obvious that that's the kind of policy they're working with, or that's the policy expectation that they're working towards. So there's going to be more and more testing, continuous testing, 2 times a week, 3 times a week. For everything you want to do, you've got to be doing testing. And on the back of that, they'll use that excuse to keep pushing that everyone's got to get vaccinated. Do you remember last year when they kept talking about how there was no need at all to vaccinate the children? And I'm saying vaccination, even though we put the usual caveat note of warning here, the things they're offering people are not vaccines. Let's make that crystal clear. They are not vaccines. But they refer to them as that, so it makes it easier for people to get what when I'm referring to the kind of stuff they're talking about, for me to just use the same language that they're using. So yeah, last year they kept repeating again and again, we don't, the children don't need to be vaccinated, they're at no real risk, the risk to benefit ratio is way too low. There's no point. They're 99.99999% at no risk of this thing. But now this year, it's like, oh, yeah, there's been this steady build-up of, well, maybe we should start vaccinating younger people. And they weren't at first very specific what they meant by younger people. As the rollout went on, they started out with the pensioners. Then they went to the over 50s. Then they started offering it to the over 35 plus or whatever, and they got to the stage where they had jab coaches, vaccine buses, moving around the country, turning up little pop-up vaccine centres for younger people. In other words, if you're not over 50, etc., etc. And then they started talking about how, well, we're going to start testing on children age, 12 to 17, I think, or 12 to 19. So they pushed it as low as 12. And then within the last couple of weeks, they've now made it plainly obvious that they have been testing on young children, including infants. And then within the last week or so, the news has come out that there are already infants. 8 months old was one of the news reports I saw coming out of America. An 8-month-old child who'd had both Pfizer injections. Both his parents were doctors, and they were delighted that he had had his jabs and all that kind of propaganda. And in other news articles that came out over the week, they mentioned that they are now doing tests on infant children as young as 6 months old. So even though they spent more than a year constantly repeating, children are at no risk, there's no need to do anything to them, they don't need the injections, blah, blah, blah. Now they are starting to do that. And now they are starting to sow that idea into the public consciousness that, when they said everyone, they mean everyone. Not just those that are ill, not just those that have comorbidities and are at high risk, the pensioners or people with other illnesses, etc. No, everyone. Everyone's going to have the injection. I think it's a separate discussion that goes off in a very heavily saturated direction in terms of the amount of information, because then you have to start asking questions about, well, what's in this thing? You kept telling us that children are at no risk, therefore the risk ratio isn't high enough to warrant giving it to them. But now you're saying that you do need to give it to them. So what's in it? Why all of a sudden have you changed your mind? What long-term purpose would this serve? Is this going to become a standard issue thing? Like every child born is going to expect, this is going to be added onto the, what do they call it? The vaccine ledger, the amount of vaccines that children are expected to get before a certain age, etc. Yeah, too many questions. I don't want to drag off in that direction again, because it's the kind of topics we've been talking about all year long. Because when you look at the information available and you look and compare the narrative as it's spun in the propaganda through the mainstream media, I think you've got to be really, really loving the government, loving it, to accept the obvious that's being presented in front of you. It's nothing to do with health. It's nothing to do with an alleged illness or pathogen. It's certainly nothing to do with a alleged pandemic. This is just about getting you to agree to having this injection so that they can build enough of a precedent so that going forward into the future, it will become accepted as being a legal standard, because look how many people have had it. Of course, it's like an act of government. It has been accepted by consent in the same way as an act is given the force of law through the consent of the governed that are subject to that act. So in the same manner, they use that same legal structure of create a precedent, and then we can use a precedent to demonstrate that consent was given. So it becomes accepted as legal when they say, oh yeah, everybody has to have this thing. Yeah, everybody's already had it. That's the way they'll present it, in a simplified fashion. So over the last week, there's been that increased push of that narrative. Everybody's got to get it. It should be obvious to most people now that it's nothing to do with your health. It's nothing to do with protecting you against a potential illness, because the evidence just keeps mounting up that it doesn't give you true immunity, therefore it's not a vaccine. And even their own so-called experts are claiming that you'll need regular booster shots and all that kind of stuff. So therefore, basically, it's pretty much useless. You'd be better off approaching the problem from a different direction completely if there was any genuine need. In other words, if it was genuinely an existent health threat to the mass of the population, which I would argue it absolutely is not, and has been proven over the last year plus. The very fact of all the various things they've claimed will fix the problem, like lockdowns and anti-social distancing and mask mandates and all that kind of shit, have obviously failed, have obviously proved non-effective, because otherwise, why do they keep insisting that everybody has to get the vaccine? Oh, it's a funny coincidence, that, isn't it? Yeah. Nothing, it's all bullshit. Nothing but bullshit. And so for the last several weeks, I've been pointing at and arguing that they pretty much, they started to lose the narrative a few months ago, several months ago, possibly, as we went into the winter of 2020, the winter of discontent. And the evidence just kept piling up from their vaccine push and the correlating evidence of the effect of this stuff that they're pumping out to people. So they lose it. I've been arguing they have been losing the narrative. I think now they know they are positioning themselves, they're shifting their stance, because they know full well they have lost the narrative. This is past tense now. They have lost the narrative. I would suggest, this would mention other stuff that's happened over the last week. I would suggest that the whole charade, the movie script that was presented by Cummings at his, his inquest deposition, or inquiry deposition, his statements at that little inquiry show that they had, with some of the stuff he said. The reason I say movie script is because the way he presented it is like he's pitching for a script. And I thought, like, somebody did a piss take of that. It's like, like you're at a director's office, and you're going, I want to do this movie about how in the near future, the whole world gets locked down because people are afraid of this thing that is supposedly so deadly that most people won't die from it. And you could just relay one of the little sort of factoids about the last year's escapades and just include it as a script element in this supposed movie you're trying to pitch. And the director would just be there like looking at you going, you what? Nobody's going to buy that shit, man. You're like, no, we'll have this slogan under the title of the movie. It'll be like, this is for real, y'all. You're like, yeah, they'll love it. The public will love it. Of course they'll believe it. No. If you tried to pitch this as a movie script, I don't know, maybe Netflix would produce it. Sorry, I got to laugh because otherwise it is crazy making. So you have to laugh at this shit. Yeah, hopefully, most people are starting to become aware of this now. The Cummings charade, the kind of stuff he was saying. I watched a few clips of it. I couldn't be arsed sitting through the whole thing. So I watched various clips of it, and people on the YouTubes had done sort of collections of the most important bits, including some of the important in a comedic fashion, like when he's trying to describe the scene as if it was in the movie Independence Day. And I was just, sitting there thinking, oh yeah, like the invisible enemy, the illness, the virus, is the aliens coming to get us, and they're like in the bunker on Independence Day and all that shit. Man, he is trying to sell a movie script. So why is he trying to sell this movie script? Over dramatized. Why is he over dramatizing it? Because that will appeal to emotion. Those kind of movies play deliberately to people's emotions. They're not a complex plot line with lots of twists and turns and, scorpion stings at the end of the storyline that require you to really sit and think about what's going on in the movie. No, this is hey, everybody join in the fight. We're going to fight the aliens. Whee! It's emotional appeal bullshit. So why is he laying out all these like little emotional baits? Because they're trying to drag people's rational mind away into emotional responses. It's been a common talking point for however long now. But while he's doing this, interspersed in those kind of emotional appeals, as well as that kind of, set decoration, framing it in that kind of emotional fashion. He tried hard, but he knows that he failed. Thousands of people potentially are dead because of the shit that they were doing. But, he knows he failed. I'm terribly sorry your grand's dead, but, fuck you. That kind of fucking attitude. So he's laying out this movie script, and interspersed is little sort of data points. I'm saying data doesn't necessarily mean they're factual. He's just laying down little information points that set a scene that creates a justification that, if anything, they are only guilty of incompetence, and that the situation was so chaotic that none of them knew how to deal with it properly, and they had no plans prepared, which is just like, when he's saying that shit, like, oh, we had no plans prepared, I was waiting for one of those people on the supposed inquiry panel to actually ask him some questions about what the fuck are you saying there's no plans prepared? You work in government, you think there's no plans prepared? That's just a blatant lie. You cannot be that dumb, so therefore that's a blatant lie. Why are you telling this inquiry blatant lies? But nobody did. Surprise, surprise. Setting the scene. They know they've lost the narrative. They know the mass of the public, even though a lot of them are going along with various elements of the bullshit because they feel they need to for whatever their reason. They don't want to get arrested. They don't want to get fined. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want other people to hate them. They don't want other people to think they're bad people. They don't want to be labelled as this, that, or the other, like anti-vaxxer or whatever. All those pejoratives that have been sown out there for the last year plus. But they know that there's a massive amount of the public that now have just had it up to here. Even if they were fooled into thinking there was some genuine threat at the beginning of all this shit, now they've had enough of it. You look at the images of the people out on the beaches and whatever over the last few days. It's a bank holiday weekend and the sun's been out shining. That's why I keep looking out the window now, because the sun's starting just to head towards the horizon. So loads of people have been out enjoying the sunshine. Are they social distancing? Nah, not really. There's sort of, a few people maybe here and there. And as I said, just, most people are sort of trying to make it look like they're going along with the rules. But really, most people are, they're not bothered. And is everybody wearing masks when they're required to and supposed to? Nah, not that much. When you go in a shop, maybe. A lot more people will do that. And I've watched them on the local high street and whatever. And you see so many people now walking down the road with the mask beard. They got the mask under their chin. And it only ever comes up when they walk through a shop door. And as soon as they come out the shop door, it comes down again. So what's the fucking point in it? If they bother to look into the information about masks, maybe a lot of people have. But as I say, they're just worried. They don't want to get hassled. They don't want to get fined, etc., etc., etc. So they just go along to get along. And unfortunately, quite a lot of the population is stuck in that kind of blinkered mindset and short-term thinking of not being able to rationalize about, well, if I acquiesce to this, yeah, it means I don't get hassled in the shop and whatever, but that means further down the line, all this other bad shit is going to happen. So what might seem at the moment in the now might seem quite innocuous of just putting this paper mask on. Where's that going to lead if we all keep doing this? I'm saying we, like the royal we kind of thing. A lot more people are seeing through the bullshit, and the narrative is falling apart. There's a lot more evidence becoming apparent, and the outspoken heretics, I'll call them that just because that's how the system views them and labels them and treats them as a separate class of people now. You're one of them conspiracy theorists. The heretics. I think the amount of information that has kept going over the year, even though they've tried to censor it on the main platforms, on the center of the town square, where the mass of the public congregates, yes, they've removed those voices. They've pushed them to the outer fringes, but they're still available for those people who actually got the energy and the thought process, the cognitive sovereignty to go, hang on a minute, the BBC's telling me this shit. I'm not sure if it's right. I'm going to go and look for some information for myself. I want to go and find out whether they're telling me the truth or whether it's all bullshit. More and more people are doing that, and those voices are still available. A lot of that information is still available and being shared and moved around, etc. And as I've argued now for a long time, a lot of that relies on, in effect, word of mouth. You can't rely on the platform itself to give you the reach the way they used to, the reach around. But the system, the algorithms deliberately try to suppress or block that kind of information. But that, like, you might be chatting to somebody and you say, oh, have you seen such and such website? Oh, have you seen so-and-so's YouTube channel? Word of mouth spreads like that. And when you combine that with the anecdotal first-hand experience that people are now starting to have, because the effect of this bullshit will reach everyone eventually. So more and more people are starting to have some kind of personal experience of how the propaganda and the lies and the deliberate manipulation has an impact on their own lives. Maybe they themselves are real, or they've got a relative who suffers from a severe illness, so they've now experienced what it's like to try and deal with the NHS here in the UK, and they've seen the effect of the terror that the state system has put into people, and they've seen the restrictive nature of the rules. They are rules, they are not laws. They are guidance that has been put in place, but the police are enforcing them as if they are new legislation, as if they are new laws that are being put on the books. They're not. They're rules, they're guidelines, they're guidance. The majority of it, the vast majority of it. It's a very loose foundation on the the Public Health Act. But other than that, everything else, like the social distancing and the mask wearing and whatever, they are guidelines. They are not law. End up trying to argue that with a policeman. It's not going to go anywhere. They've been actively recruiting and training the police to not give a shit. I was watching the live stream earlier this afternoon and this evening from Shepherd's Bush, where the what was it called? The Love Down. It was sort of like the anti-lockdown camp on the green at Shepherd's Bush. I think it's a bit of a love-in. There's a few things that could be said about that situation. But watching the people there, they were just a bunch of people enjoying in the park, enjoying themselves in the park, playing some music. They'd set up tents and whatever. Obviously, the intention was to stay there in situ for as long as they could, potentially permanently, like, you know, a long-term protest camp. But it only took about 2 hours of them being on site. And then some of the, what I call blue bottles, you know, the ones who wear the blue vests, the liaison police, they turned up and started chatting to people. And then within about another half an hour or so, the TSG started turning up. And there were several vans, and there were a number of police at least equal to the number of the supposed protesters, you know, the naughty people. So if there was about 50 of the naughty people who set up this little camp in the park on the green, there was at least about 50 police. TSG, they didn't have their helmets on, but they had the helmets with them on their belts. You know, they had all the riot gear with them, and it looked like a training exercise to me. They made a little square, they moved into the crowd, they kettled and compressed the crowd, and then they pulled a few people out and arrested them. And they made a little, it was like watching a reenactment, you know, like the people who reenact the Roman legionnaires and whatever. They made their little square, and they were marching as a square to guide these arrested people to the van, etc. Yeah, same old mob-handed shit. And we've seen the evidence of that again and again and again from multiple countries. It's no point trying to discuss with the police about things like the masks being pointless and whatever. Their response will usually be along the lines of, we're not allowed to be personally involved, or, you know, to give a personal opinion. We just have to do as we're told, basically, just following orders. It's funny, you know, you hear that phrase again and again and again. We just have to follow orders like good little sheepdogs. You know, the public are the sheep, and they are the dogs that are used to fence them in. Anyway, digressing a bit away from talking about masks, or mentioning the masks anyway, in terms of the lost the narrative. Another, I mean, I've mentioned the Cummings. There's a whole lot about that Cummings statement that you could really dig into, but I think that's part of what they want, because the whole charade was about redirecting people's angst or their questions away from, was there even a pandemic in the first place? Was there even this alleged pathogen, and was it even as deadly as they're claiming it is, such that all the other actions following on from that are justified because of how much risk involved, etc., etc. No, instead, you just have to assume that the actual alleged pathogen is real, is genuine, that there was a definite mortal threat to the public. And what you should actually be arguing about is whether Cummings and Whitty and Handycock and Bojo the clown were just incompetent or made mistakes, or maybe there was a little bit of corruption, like he got somebody to pay for his new furniture. Yeah. Oh, don't bring up the question about whether they should be subject to corporate manslaughter. No, you don't want to mention that. And you don't want to mention the fact that if there was no real pandemic in the first place, then everything they did after that beginning point, you know, every policy they enacted, every decision they made, which was guided by the supposed pandemic emergency situation, all go straight out the window. And then you have to start asking questions of like, well, why were you actually doing this then if there was no pandemic in the first place? What else? What other driving factors were there? What other motivations were there, etc., etc.? Hopefully will lead people towards information like the World Economic Forum, the WEF, and the great supposed Great Reset. You know, that's just one thread of what's going on here, but hopefully you get the point. Yeah? That whole Cummings debacle is, he's just doing his job again. He's being the controlled opposition fall guy. Yeah, as I said earlier, he did make a little statement here and there saying, "Oh, I know I wasn't good enough at my job. I didn't do my job well enough." So he's sort of giving up a certain amount of responsibility, but all of that responsibility that he's presenting of himself is all couched within the safety that there was actually a genuine pandemic. Therefore, even though he was making mistakes and even though he was failing to get the job done, he was only doing what he was doing because of the emergency situation. Yeah. It's like if somebody tells you the building's burning and when you're trying to get out of the building, you fall over a few times and you open the wrong door or whatever. Oh, I've made a few mistakes, but I was just trying to get out. That kind of shit. Yeah, that's been happening for a while. They've been building up that general narrative. I think I might mention this a few weeks ago. I think that was why Bojo's court case, where he's supposedly being done for not paying council tax or something. Those little misdemeanors have been thrown out to the public because they don't want you to look at the potentially the bigger crimes that have been going on. No, he's a little bit. He's the scraps off the table. You're not getting the actual red meat of the situation. But another, bring it up to date, catch up on this week. Over this last week, over last weekend on Saturday in London, there was a really big get together. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people decided to go shopping in London on Saturday, all at the same time. And they decided to have a bit of a walk around while they were doing it. I'm using euphemisms, you know what I'm talking about. But in terms of, just to reference it back to the narrative, they have failed at keeping the narrative going. They are now too weak to flatten the uprising. Their narrative has just, fallen to pieces. So they're trying to stitch together another one, rapid. But when that protest was happening, it had been going for a couple of hours, and then some of the mainstream media sort of made a mention of it. What was the one on the Telegraph? Hundreds of anti-vaxxers gather at Parliament Square, and the pictures they showed were somewhat, selective. So there was only a few people in the frame. You're quite low down to the ground, so you just saw other people's like shoulders, head and shoulder kind of shot, portrait shot, I suppose you call it. So you couldn't see the amount of people there. And they labelled it as hundreds of so-and-so people. I saw other footage. I was watching live stream footage on the day on Saturday, plus I've seen other footage after the fact that showed that scene in Parliament Square. And even that beginning section, because a lot of people gathered before the march started in Parliament Square, even that beginning section, there were thousands of people there. And it was obvious there was thousands of people there. So as I say, their cameraman must have really sort of, hunkered down and gone, oh yeah, I'll just get the picture of that guy's back over there, to try and make it look like there was only a few people. And then a bit later on, same day, the Sun, I was going to say newspaper, it's not a newspaper, is it? The Scum. The Scum put up a similar article which said hundreds of people gathered for protest march in London, and they showed a picture from Trafalgar Square looking down Oxford Street, and literally in the picture you could see thousands of people, and the headline said hundreds of protesters. Now I know there's lots of people have already said this, and it's been said so many times in different ways. The mainstream media is acting as a mouthpiece for government propaganda. Yes, they are. The people who work at those mainstream media companies and institutions, why are they not speaking out about what they're pumping out? Why are they just pumping out the shit? Well, that's not exactly strictly accurate. If you do actually watch a lot of the news and look at the different news media sites and newspaper articles, all that kind of thing, you'll see there is a smattering of things here and there that are not necessarily saying things directly or asking direct questions, but there's just little indications of like, this can't be right. How do they, like the Sun showing an image of literally thousands of people and the headline says hundreds of protesters? So this is just I'm just positing this as conjecture, a suggestion of maybe some of the people at the mainstream media are trying to think of creative ways of letting the public know that what they're looking at in print, whether it's on a screen or on a bit of paper or whatever, is bullshit, is propaganda. So did they deliberately title that article in such a ridiculous contradiction to indicate to the reader, like, look, we've been forced to print this shit. We've been told our jobs, our industries are on the line if we don't just print what we're told to print. So we're putting this stuff out to sort of say, look, can you not see how hypocritical this shit is? Is it not obvious to you now? I'm not trying to defend them or justify them. I'm just curious of how, even though it was the scum, I think other ones did similar. They tried to claim like there was only hundreds of people there and showed images where it was obvious as thousands, I'm not trying to defend them, but I'm just curious as to whether they are deliberately putting things out like that, where it's like, well, we know most politicians are pretty inept. It is, I was going to say, an unfortunate part of how Parliament works or how the government systems work, but it's not truly unfortunate, it's deliberate. Most of the politicians are put into positions that they have either no skill or experience of those positions, like that kind of job, that kind of work. Like, you look at Hancock's history, he has no real experience or skill to be a health minister. He's not a doctor or anything like that. And this is true across the board for all of the politics. Sorry, I just noticed the chat. Drop the link. I'll have a check in a sec, Toast. Thank you. He's not in a position that he has any skill or experience, to back up doing the job he's doing. And it's the same across the board for almost every parliamentary position. They don't really give any credence to I suppose it's too much of a meritocracy if you put people into positions that they actually have knowledge of that job, that work, that industry. So most people are aware of that kind of thing, Politicians are not necessarily highly intelligent in a genuine sense of the word. They may have come from Eton or Oxford or Cambridge or some other, well-known institution, but often their degree, if they've even managed to get one, is usually something, that's not exactly difficult to get in the modern academic system. And sometimes they just don't do fuck all work for them qualifications anyway in the first place. They just get given them, In effect, it's like aristocracy automatically awards them a bit of paper that has something on it that's somehow academically recognizable, just so that they can have letters after their name, and it makes them seem like they're intelligent or like there's some kind of expert. Therefore, there's some kind of justification for them to rule over us, because this is where you get into the kind of eugenics ideological standpoint. For a long time now, I'm saying these people as if I'm othering them or separating them, but they are in effect separating themselves by their own ideological attitudes and arguments. They consider themselves to be better than everybody else. Often people are referred to as kind of like intellectual elitism, but it's not. I don't think that's really an accurate way of describing it, because the majority of them are not in the position they are through intellectual choices. They haven't they haven't sat and rationalized why they are choosing that particular ideological standpoint. They've just been indoctrinated into it. So it's far more of an emotional thing for them than it is anything else. They've been told throughout their entire upbringing that they are better than everyone else, that they have more of an important position to play in the world. What they do is important and everybody else is just a little worker drones. That kind of attitude is embedded into them. So they're not necessarily intelligent in any way. Yeah. So anyway, the reason I was going off on that ramble was to make the point about, from what the press published on Saturday and Sunday about the hundreds of people, hundreds of protesters, is a clear demonstration that what we have here is a total failure at simple mathematics. So if the journalists are incapable of such basic mathematical abilities, then what do you think the politicians are like? Because, the politicians keep giving the attitude out through the media that everybody loves everything. But if they think 100 people is not what you see in the image, if they look at an image where there's literally tens of thousands of people in the image, and you ask them, can you give us an approximate estimation how many people are in that image? And they're like, 100, maybe 100. Yeah. If that's their kind of counting ability, what is the intellectual ability that they profess, even though they are presented to us constantly telling us, oh, everybody loves it, everybody's getting the vaccine. So when you say everybody, mate, do you mean like just 100 people? There's like nearly 70 million people in the UK. Can you actually comprehend those kind of numbers, or do you need some little pictures to help you through? I did say I was going to share some imageries, but let me just check that message. And I put show the number. Oh yeah, I think I did watch that particular one, but I will copy link. Let's open it up. Oh, hang on. Get the right tab. Sorry if I'm hiccuping at you. Actually, yeah, if I open this in the other one, and then I'll be able to screen share it with audio, and we'll just show a little bit of this. Oh, that might be a little bit loud. But yeah, I watched most of the coverage that was done on Saturday. I had this many years ago, back in the 90s, I got quite addicted to watching live news when they first started doing the 24-hour news kind of stuff, and we had cable TV and whatever, and I was subscribed to one of the cable. I think it was Virgin, was it? Well, it started out as Birmingham Cable, going all the way back. But anyway, yeah, I was subscribed to like the various news channels, including CNN and Fox and whatever. And I used to sit and have multiple TVs all running at the same time. Yes. Maybe that was a bit too much. But these days now, it's like I watch 2 live streams at the same time. And then periodically I'll go back and reference, like, right, okay, has anybody uploaded any other footage, video section about this particular bit of the protests or whatever. But yeah, I was watching at least 2. I kept changing which ones. The only one I stuck with for most of the day was subject access coverage, simply because I've seen in general he gets good connection. He has a good connection, which means his signal usually stays quite stable for many hours at a time. Whereas other people can often lose connection partway through and things like that. So you sometimes lose the feed. But yeah, I watched 5+ hours of the coverage on Saturday, and a few times he got to a position where you could clearly see the mass of people that there were stretched up and down the road. Yeah. Let me put it in bigger mode. Right, okay, so yeah. I'll play this just a little bit. Oh, that's more near the end. Let me back it up a bit. You see, yeah, this was one of the scenes when they were heading down towards Shepherd's Bush. Do you think that's hundreds of people? that hundreds of people? All the way back, all the way up there. And this was, yeah, maybe that's a good place to stop it. I don't want to show too much because I don't want him, well, it probably wouldn't be him personally. It'd probably be the fucking YouTube algorithm. Might stump me for sharing his content. But, you know, you can't say that was hundreds of people. If you claim that's hundreds of people, you really, really need to go back to primary school and just start all over again. Obviously, the education system has completely failed you, and you need to get some genuine education, not bullshit indoctrination from the state system. So, to mention this, when they started going sort of off course and left the centre of London, I actually thought that was somewhat of a good idea, because they dragged the protest and the police requirements to obviously follow the protest, because the police were deliberately sitting back and not creating a big scene, because they want the public to ignore this. They want the public to think nothing happened apart from a handful of crazy anti-vaxxer conspiracy theory lunatic tinfoil hatters going crazy and trying to storm a shopping centre. There was no storming involved. I watched that entire footage, and I've watched several other clips of what occurred at the doors of that shopping centre that have been uploaded by other people. So I've seen several different points of view of that situation. There was no storming whatsoever. The only storming that happened was the police pushing into people, trying to push the crowd back and batoning people for zero reason. No reason at all, but they were, you know, taking the opportunity to have a few whacks at people. As is always the case, you always get some antagonistic people in the crowd, but even amongst those, there was no outright like attacks on the police or any of that kind of bullshit. Yeah, there was some angry language and some, you know, gesturing and stuff like that, but there was nothing like storming the what was it called, the Westfield shopping centre. The way the press has tried to present it, you know, they've done the classic thing of take a tiny snapshot where there's a little bit of an argy-bargy or some kind of confrontation happening, and that becomes the entire story. Whereas really, like, that was nearly towards the end of the entire coverage, the end of the day. I agreed with the idea. Well, I say I agreed like I have any, you know, influence on it, but I thought it was a good idea that they veered away from the centre of London, because it forced the police to start operating on the fly, which gave the protesters an opportunity to move a bit more freely. And in that, it gave them also the opportunity to connect with the public that are outside of the centre of London, which is somewhat of a separate kind of environment. And I'm not talking about like the city of London being its own thing and whatever, you know. I just mean the kind of attitude around that centre of London. It is primarily a quite well-off shopping area, shopping district. And you've got all the sections that include all the governance buildings, you know, parliamentary buildings and stuff like that. So you don't exactly get a good general cross-section of the UK public when you're only in that central area of London. So the fact they went outside of that area meant they were encountering people who were just doing everyday shopping. You know, people sat in cafes, and there was multiple times during that afternoon, I was watching the coverage, multiple times where they would encounter people at a cafe, or people would come outside the front of their house and they'd be cheering and applauding and, you know, waving and whatever. That was much more engagement with the general public than if they just went round in a little traditional circle in the centre of London and ended up at Hyde Park. I do think that trying to do this Westfield invasion, maybe it was a good idea on paper, as it were, but to try and enact it on the spot, it wasn't exactly well thought out, because they tried to compress a crowd of many, many thousands into a tiny walkway that led to the main doors or some of the main doors into that shopping centre. Not a good idea. No, it is. I was listening to Based Welshman, and Rocking Mr. E made the same point as well. It's not a good idea to try and get all the people into that narrow pass. Yeah, think about the Spartans. Yeah, the police were like Ionidas. Was it Ionidas? There's a handful of police guarding the doors, the pass, the hot pass. There's a handful of Spartan police, yeah, even though they're not Spartans, but hopefully you get the metaphor, the analogy. Doing that was a bit of a mistake. That was like the crowd became the army that was just washing up against the handful of defenders. I think it's a good idea to go into a shopping centre, maybe. That's been shown before, that if you can go in and take the crowd through the shopping centre, again, you get much more direct engagement with the general populace. You reach more people. You think of all the hundreds, if not many thousands of people that saw that protest, that had no idea that there was a protest happening on that Saturday. And yet they stood there for hours watching people go past, for hours, because there was that many people. It probably took quite a while for the entirety of the crowd to move past. Yeah, you think about that when they then go in and turn on the BBC and there's literally nothing. That sends much more of a message and has the Streisand effect. It's just dripping in the Streisand effect. I watched a clip that the Welshman put up where he's talking to a pub landlord in a pub that is on one of the streets that the protest walked down. And the landlord said he's been the landlord at that site for 20 plus years, and he's never seen a protest that big. While I was watching the footage, I'd give a conservative estimate of at least 250,000. Yeah, multiple hundreds of thousands, probably up above that. I'm being deliberately very conservative because I know what the media's like. And if you choose too big a number, they'll jump all over you and go, see, told you he's telling bullshit, because look at the stupid numbers he's talking about. That's not 100 people. When you see this many people in an image, it's always 100, because that's the most we can count to. Anyway, yeah. Hundreds of thousands of people were there. I've seen some people estimate it as a million. It's really hard to gauge unless you've got good drone coverage, aerial footage. I will show a little clip of this as well, because similar to last time, or one of the previous times, some people happen to take that kind of little device with them. Let me put this one in here as well, because no, there is no audio on this one, so it doesn't matter. I can just share it on the other. Sorry, I'm talking out loud just because of the way YouTube restricts some of the licensed stuff with the browsers. If I try to play something in the one browser, you can't get the audio off it. Whereas if I play it in the other browser, it'll allow the audio through. But this is thanks, actually, terribly sorry, I'm doing my usual bad routine thing of not putting the link in the chat. So I'll say it now before I've even looked to check. Thanks, Taz, for putting the links in. And I know other people will always put the links in because I'm terrible at remembering to do that. When I was watching Steve's show on Thursday, one of the piss takers was asking me, because I mentioned about the 8-month-old infant story news, and they said, have you got a direct link to that? I was like, no, go and look it up yourself. It's there, it's available on the media. Why do you need me to hand it to you? I didn't exactly say that, but I pretty much said that. And Taz put a link in for me. So, yeah, the information is out there, folks. If I'm speculating about things, I will say that I'm speculating. I might forget now and then because I'm not perfect. I've never claimed to be perfect. But most of the time, I will say, oh, I'm speculating about this possibility. But if I tell you things like they are now testing on 8-month-old, I don't say that unless I'm basing it on something that's available to the general public. Because I'm not going to secret hidden websites on the dark web. I'm just using the same internet that's accessible to the general public. Because to me, that's important to make the point about how that media is being manipulated, etc. Yeah. But thanks to Jay Harry for uploading this. This is some drone footage from the Saturday. It's not very long, but it's enough. So again, you get the idea that the massive crowd stretches all up and down the road. To say that's hundreds of people is just such a ridiculous statement. You think of all those thousands of people in the public that were not on the march, that saw that march on the day, and then they look at the scum newspaper headline that says hundreds of people. That will have a much, much more engaging effect on those people when they go, hang on a minute. They may not think it in the kind of way I'm wording it, but, they'll see that headline and as a first-hand witness, they'll go, that's not right. They will know straight away. It's not I'm not sure if the media's telling me the truth. No, they will know. They have gnosis. They'll see that kind of headline and they'll go, that is just insane. You're saying that's hundreds of people? No fucking way. There was literally thousands and thousands of people on that protest march. So, losing the narrative in the extreme. It is falling apart rapidly. It's like a really crappy old car that's just decided enough is enough. It needs to be retired. Now I've lost my chat room. Where's it gone? There it is. All right. So I did sort of ramble off and forgot to check the chat room for a little while. So I'll come back to the chat room for a minute. Let me screen share it again. It's the best way because then it makes it easier for me to be focusing on it. All right, hello to everyone who's joined the chat room. Roberto, hello, thanks for joining in, Ron. You saw it all on TV, so it must be true. Yeah, absolutely. I saw Bojo get his injection on the TV, so it must be true. Mink109, hello. Hope you're doing all right over there. I think we're going to be catching up to you guys pretty soon. Another story they've been putting out in the last few days is that now they're probably not going to bother with the vaccine passports. So yeah, right. What they're saying actually, Hugo Talks pointed this out in his video earlier because I thought the same when I saw the headlines. What they're actually saying is they're not going to enforce the vaccine passports as a domestic requirement across the board. So in other words, you're not going to need a vaccine passport to go in a pub and get a pint. But they're still going to keep them in place at the airports. Because, as I said a long time ago, several months ago now, even though it's not an official vaccine passport or green pass or whatever on your device when you go through the airport, you still have to carry with you the little bits of paper or a card that shows paper proof that you have had an injection. I keep wanting to say the vaccine, but as I say, it's not really a vaccine. You've got to carry proof if you go through the airport. So in other words, the vaccine passport is already in place at the airports. So they're not getting rid of that, no. What they're doing with that news story is putting out a trial balloon into the public to gauge public reaction, and they will shift their stance and shift their narrative to be able to get away with as much as they possibly can without pushing the public too far into an uprising. Yeah. So, as I say, they'll go, oh, yeah, you don't need a passport to go to the pub. No, we changed their mind on that, but you'll still have to have it when you go through the airport. And for now, we'll still keep calling it a vaccine passport, but eventually it will morph into a carbon credit passport, which includes a social credit attachment to it. Your carbon credit will be your social credit, because that's what the whole social credit bullshit is about, really. Management control, resource control. North Star, hello, thanks for joining in the chat. And Summer, hello, yes, it's been a lovely summer day today. Hope you've been enjoying the good weather if you're in the UK. Anyway, Krishna, hello, mate, hope you well. Hope you finished work for the day. You mentioned you were restocking shelves the other day. I bet people are going through the alcohol like nobody's business there, especially if it's nice and chilled straight out the freezer box. Not some tat throw, hello mate, thanks for joining in. Fake fucking hippies. I made that comment when I was chatting with the guys when I was watching that live stream of the love down loving thing today. It was like the kind of classic situation of the Rozzers are mobbing the hippies again. Like there's a bunch of hippies all just singing about love in the park. They got their guitars and whatever and their tambourines and they're hugging each other and singing about love. And in come the stormtroopers. Yeah, I do. That's why I say I'm a bit dubious about that situation. It looks somewhat like a training setup. That was done maybe for cameras, for a PR job, or for just a training session for the TSG. Give them a weekend outing, so they can vent a bit of steam by jumping on some hippies. Maybe. Ron Malcolm, hello mate, thanks for joining in. Yeah, exactly. That's spot on. Can I find that in the StreamYard chat and put that on screen? Because that is totally spot on. And my chat room's miles behind. Where's it gone? There you go. Just for the folks that maybe can't read the smaller text in the chat room, that is absolutely spot on. And just doing my job is no defense under the law, and it's also one of the most cowardly responses. Abdication of self-responsibility whatsoever. What are you saying to me when you say shit like that? You're basically saying that you are just a tool. You are a flesh robot for the whims of some sociopath or psychopath who thinks that he's got some kind of authority or whatever bullshit. Richard Crooks, hello mate, thanks for joining in. The Thatchers versus the Miners is on tonight at 9 p.m. Really? A lot of the situations have been very akin to that time period. Dave's made a very good point earlier when we was chatting that a lot of what's been going on over the past few months certainly is them atomizing or attempting to atomize the protest movement, the uprising, the energy of, I'm calling it uprising. I've thought carefully about how to word that little subtitle. It's why I put the bit in brackets, they are, just to make sure people understand I'm talking about the state system, the they, them. I'm not talking about people in general being too weak to flatten the uprising. No, them. Their narrative has lost its power. They are now desperately trying to create a new storyline to convince the public of. So they are too weak to flatten the energy of that uprising of people realizing that they've been bullshitted, that they've been conned, they've been tricked. Barry Truth, hello. They were just shopping. What was the problem? Yeah, exactly. They should have just let them in to do some shopping. Miss Maskless, hello. Thanks for joining in. All the good people. Hello to all the good people joining in. And one of the things I really appreciate about this, we're often complaining about the internet and media in general and whatever, but always have to acknowledge that without this method of communication, we wouldn't have a similar situation like now where we've got people from pretty much all around the world who are able to connect with each other and share information and demonstrate that any suggestion that you are alone in your ideas or alone in your questions about all the bullshit narrative that they're trying to feed you, is, again, it's as ridiculous as them claiming there was 100 people at that protest. Yeah, you're certainly not alone. You're certainly not a lone individual thinking strange thoughts that nobody else dares to consider because they're just so crazy. No, not at all. You look at those images of the many thousands of people. Yeah, it's certainly, just a usual caveat to say, of course, you're not going to agree with everyone about everything. Not everybody there is going to have the same kind of ideas as you. Not everybody there is going to have the same amount of information that maybe you've looked at, or vice versa. Maybe they know 100 times more than you. But on the core foundational reasons of why they're all there for pretty much the same reason. And that's why, as Dave's pointed out, the system has been making loads of effort to try and split up the groupings of people and send you off in different directions for different causes. So are you an anti-vaxxer, or are you an anti-masker? Or maybe you're just anti-lockdown. Or maybe you're anti-Israel. So you've been caught up in all the anti-Israeli protests kind of stuff, or pro-Israeli protesting. What cause do you want to join in with? We've got the Extinction Rebellion still, sort of popping up every now and then and making a little bit of a stink every so often, and being allowed to have their protests, and their protests get featured on the mainstream media. There's a whole smorgasbord of selection. There's a big selection available, and that's deliberate, because in a similar fashion to how a con man will attempt to con 100 people because he knows 1 in 100 is always a gullible sucker, guaranteed. All you need to do is canvass 100 people. All you need to do is cast that line 100 times, and the 1 in 100 that you get on the hook, that's your dinner for tonight. So they put out a big selection. They give people loads of options of what you could choose to be protesting about, what cause you want to join. Because they know then that gives their controlled opposition manipulators the ability to draw your energy off in a different direction, so that they hope they don't end up with crowds of 500,000 people walking around London, smiling and waving and chatting to people around them and handing out leaflets with loads of information on. Yeah, I think one of the most innovative ways of doing it that I've seen, that seems to have been somewhat borrowed from like the protesters over in Hong Kong, the use of umbrellas. I know in Hong Kong that was a very sensible option to deal with things like tear gas grenades and stuff like that. Yeah, the umbrellas make a really good defense in general. Yeah, not necessarily good against a direct fire, but you know what I mean. And now people have taken that concept and added to it by writing messages on the umbrella. So you see lots of people walking around with their umbrellas with, various messages, various slogans or information written onto the umbrella. It's just simple things. For many years I've been talking about how protests don't really work, not in the way that people want them to or hope that they will. I did exactly the same thing when I was younger. I went on lots and lots of protest marches over the years, and it was always with the expectation of, if we get out in the streets and chant some slogans and wave some placards, then the government will change what they're doing, and they'll do what we want. Or the other classic canard is, if only we get our guy elected, then he'll get the job done once he's elected. So we just need to, show support for our guy or whatever. No, it doesn't work that way. Or very, very, very rarely. Occasionally you get really good outcomes, like what happened in Iceland several years ago, where they stood outside their parliament building and protested until the politicians in question came out, and they were, in effect, they were sacked on the spot kind of thing, and they had a re-election, a new election and whatever. Doesn't necessarily mean things work out well in the long run, because you look at the situation now, are they heading back to where they were before all that happened? Most likely. But, it doesn't always work. Very occasionally does it work in the way that you actually want to expect it to. But the way that it definitely works, the way that it absolutely does work, is when you get situations like on Saturday, where you get a combination of the Streisand effect. The lack of coverage makes it more effective. The sheer mass of people all joining in under one sort of general banner. They weren't being specific of saying, we are an anti-vax march, we are an anti-this march. No, we are a freedom march. Yeah, that's what it was about. And you can put all those other subheadings under that main heading. When people come together in that kind of number and it goes off on what is 99.997% peaceful, yeah, think about that. Potentially nearly 500,000 people marching around through London talking about and saying things that, according to the media, those things are totally abhorrent and controversial. You say you're against the vaccine, you're Hitler. Whoa! And yet there was, quarter to 500,000 people walking through London talking about that kind of thing, and yet there was no major punch-ups or, no major conflict happened until the police decided they didn't want them to go in that shopping centre. Why didn't they want them going in the shopping centre? Partly, there's some good arguments to be made about safety when you're dealing with such large numbers of people in confined spaces. Something I think maybe the organisers or the people who were steering the march didn't consider possibly, I don't know. But there's also the fact that they didn't want the public seeing or encountering... Oh, no, that's not enough light. Let's try that. That'll do. Encountering that number of people who were, as I say, all sort of following the same thread. They were all in some kind of agreement about why they were there, to protest for freedom or to get our freedoms back. Maybe even that's not exactly accurate, because the freedoms are still there. It's just whether people actually stand up and exercise them. The government will keep pushing to try and take rights away from you, but it's not so much that they take them away, because that's just an impossibility. They cannot actually take them away from you. All they can do is restrict you exercising your rights. Your rights are inherent and inalienable to your existence. So they can't take them away. They can just stop you from exercising them, which is in general what they do. They restrict you from exercising your rights, and then they give you a little license or a little pass, a passport, and they give it to you as a liberty, which just means like a gift. It's a benefit from your rulers. Oh, you've been a good boy today. You're allowed to go out and play for 8 hours. Sorry, I'm just remembering like getting liberty when I was in the Navy, and you'd go out on the piss for the night. So you're at liberty for the next 6 hours. You can go out to the pub and get pissed. No, it's not how it works. If you go to a protest march expecting that the government is suddenly going to throw up their hands and go, oh, look, hundreds of people. Remember, they shit at mass. So, the biggest number they can cope with is hundreds. Hundreds of people have protested through the centre of London. Therefore, we realise that we're terribly naughty people and we should change all our policies, and we'll now do what the protesters are saying we should do. Whenever has that happened? Even with the Iceland situation, it didn't happen like that. That doesn't happen. So a lot of people, like I did when I was younger, I'd go to those kind of protest marches thinking, we'll go march down the road, chant the slogan, wave the banner, blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't work out that way. But the way it does work is it carries a message to everybody else that sees it, everybody else that encounters it, even if they are just seeing it on a screen. You can look for corroboration that the thing actually happened. You don't just rely on one image or one video clip or whatever. Lots of things can be CGI'd there. I'm sure they could CGI 1 million people stood on top of the Parliament building if they wanted to. But anyway, that message reaches people in a much more direct fashion. When it's heavily organized, or when it's controlled and enabled by some kind of NGO, it's more likely controlled opposition of one form or another. I think a lot of the public can sense that, even if they may on the surface agree with the alleged arguments of the protest movement. So I'm thinking of, as an example, things like the Extinction Rebellion. A lot of the public may agree in general, even if their understanding, their knowledge of the situation is misplaced or whatever. They agree in general because most people are good-natured. They don't want to see the world damaged. They don't want to see nature getting damaged. They don't want to see the poor little koalas getting burnt in the fires in Australia. So people like the idea of caring for nature. They like the suggestion that he's sort of, the foundation, or one of the foundations of Extinction Rebellion. We've got to care for the planet, that kind of thing. They may not be aware of all the other subtext or connotations of what goes along with that shit. But when the public encounters that kind of heavily organized and heavily media promoted protest group, maybe it is that kind of, there's a little bit of disdain there. There's a little bit of surrealism, because even for most of the public that may care about the message, they see the event go off and they're like, it's highly organized. Look at the banners. They're all mass produced, like in a print shop or whatever. They're all wearing basically uniforms. They're all singing songs that have been professionally recorded and produced so that they can sing along with them and play them on the loudspeaker. All highly overproduced, like a Hollywood show or a Broadway show, or, something down in the centre of London, like Cats or whatever. It's a performance. And I think most of the public can sense that, even if they're not directly questioning it. But with something like what happened on Saturday, when you get what is seemingly just a mass of people coming together for no agenda organized reason, if anything, it's completely counter to the agenda. Yes, it's true to say that the government are not going to change because of the protest march, but the direction that the government is trying to drag everyone will change when the majority of the public start going in a different direction. So the reason they put out that message about the COVID passport, why did that news story come out, like, was it today or yesterday? So you're talking 2 days at the most between the protest march on Saturday and then the news coming out that they're going to drop the COVID vaccination passport? Do you not think there's a bit of a connection there? They looked at the numbers, because remember, they had the police helicopter up there, so they would have got a really good estimation of how many people were there. They would have got all the reports from the various police groups that were on the street saying, like, yeah, they're not going for it. We prodded a few of the hippies with our truncheons, but they're not fighting back. So we can't get the justification of them being, violent protesters or any of that kind of shit. They would have been amalgamating all that evidence and information and going, shit, yeah. If that protest march, the numbers of people on that protest march are only a small percentage representation of the people who feel the same, because you look at the demographics of it, the number of people that are ever willing to actually get off their arse and go and join in with a protest march is a tiny fraction. It's like 1%, 2% of the actual number of people, 98% other people who agree with their cause or their argument, but for whatever reason are not prepared or able to go and actually join in with the march. All right, so if that, I'll use the conservative estimate, if that 250,000 people who were there on Saturday is 1% representation of the people who feel the same, you do the maths, That means easily a majority of the public in the UK do not agree with this bullshit. They do not agree with the way the government is trying to push the direction of this shit. And then a day or so afterwards, we get the story of, we're going to drop the COVID vaccination passports. We don't think they're really viable. Or they'll make an excuse like they don't think they're required anymore or something like that. They need to make themselves look as innocent as they can for now, while they wait for the pushback to build to the point of an actual genuine inquiry of some kind. Let me just check my notes, make sure I've not forgotten anything else I wanted to mention. Well, the one other thing I want to mention, which seems it is somewhat separate from all this stuff to do with the protest marching and whatever. Sorry, let me just look back at the chat. Paul C, hello, thanks for joining in. Sorry, I just saw your name coming up in the chat, sir. Somebody I hadn't said hello to yet. Yeah, see, this other sort of bit of news is somewhat separate, a bit of a tangent from talking about the protest marches and all that kind of stuff. But while mentioning about narratives falling apart and the status quo of the state system being revealed for what it is, it's nothing to do with caring for the public good or caring for the public health. The backbone, the foundational core of this entire system is not to do with caring for people in the way that you think they mean care. They don't mean care as in they give a shit about your well-being and they want you to be happy, healthy and enjoying your life. No, they care for you like you are cattle on a farm. They manage the population like numbers on a page in a ledger book. That's what they mean when they say care for the public. But this is why I thought this is very relevant to mention, to include with this news. Within the last, I don't know exactly when the information come out. Certainly, I know it's hit the news only in the last few days. I think I saw it on Saturday on Reuters. I don't actually have a page to share with you for this because it's somewhat available all over the news media anyway. They're not turning it into a major big story just yet at the moment, but they have all acknowledged it. 215 child remains, the remains of 215 children have been found at an old institutional care home in Canada. Now, maybe for some of you that are new to a lot of this kind of information, or the conspiracy genre kind of thing, well, you may have no idea about all that kind of stuff. But this is something that goes back quite a few decades now, and it wasn't until the 1980s, I think, maybe even as late as the early 1990s, before the last care homes. These care homes were for tribal peoples in Canada. The indigenous population whose children were forced to go to state-run schools. They were not allowed to speak their own native languages. They were not allowed to practice their own native culture, or it had to be done in an extremely limited fashion. In other words, only at like a tourist centre where they had to perform rituals for the tourist entertainment kind of bullshit. They weren't allowed to live in their traditional ways, that kind of stuff. And while all of that was going on, while the newly founded Canadian state, because it's not really that old, remember, was busy slowly genociding their population, because that is really what it comes down to. It was a generational degradation of their population, their numbers, their culture. Deliberate destruction of their culture, which this system that dominates the planet has been doing for hundreds of years. They did it to us here in the UK. They've done it to many other cultures around the world. But yeah, sorry, before I digress too far. That sort of institutionalized school system that they had in Canada, a lot of it included what you could call them orphanages, but they weren't necessarily orphans. There were some situations where basically the children were taken away and put into care, and care was in these institutional homes. And there is just an absolute mountain of witness evidence from They'd now be adults, most of them, yeah, but from people who suffered in those care homes, from the way they were mistreated. And this as well is a connection to some of the stuff I've been talking about tonight as well. There is threads that try to steer that information off into a ridiculous direction so that then it can be ridiculed and parodied and turned into just another justification for the media to point at crazy conspiracy theorists and say how they're talking bullshit just for, to try and sell books or whatever. There was a particular character who tried to basically appropriate all that information, all that thread about the abuse and killing of children in the care homes in Canada. And he tried to make a lot of money out of it and played the whole circus game and whatever. But that did not remove the truth of that situation. And it's more, about 10 years ago now, I had the opportunity to go over to Canada, somewhere I'd always wanted to visit. For most of my life, I'd wanted to go over there and especially go up the mountains, which we did while I was there. I went over to Alberta, near Calgary, and we travelled up into the Rockies, and we went through to BC, British Columbia, and, did a little bit of kind of sightseeing, but not really the typical tourist trap stuff. A little bit in one of the towns called Banff. I think, is it Banff or Banff? I'm not sure if it's an N or an M. But yeah, it's this like cutesy little town that's literally right up in the middle of the Rockies. And it's amazing up there if you like that kind of scenery tourism. If you enjoy being out in the nature and enjoying the view and all that kind of stuff, it's an amazing place to go. But anyway, while I was there, I was staying with someone who was a indigenous tribal person, somebody from one of the indigenous tribes. And I was staying with them, and I got the opportunity to obviously chat with their relatives and a lot of the people they interact with. And I saw and heard first-hand witness information about a lot of that stuff to do with those care homes. So over the years, I've looked at various information, again, thanks to the internet, but to hear it directly from people who experienced it directly, it's another one of those subject matters that gets pointed to and often gets just ridiculed as being conspiracy idiocy. And it's not at all. It is absolutely true. Maybe not everything you've ever heard or seen mentioned about the situation is true. Of course not. They try and hide the facts. They try and bury it in bullshit. But it is true that a lot of their peoples, they lost a lot of people. That's just one situation, 215 remains found. And that's just one site. And as I say, that over this last week, I think it was only a few days ago, that was just like a little blip on the news feeds. I think I've seen it on a total of 3 of the different news media. Reuters mentioned it, and I can't remember who else it was. It might have been the Telegraph again. Maybe I've seen too many Telegraph articles recently. But anyway, it's not pleasant stuff, but it does help to, again, reveal what this system is at its core. It is not actually caring about the genuine health and well-being of the population on an individual level. They don't love you like your parents love you, kind of thing. Caveat that, yes, I know some parents are arseholes, but it's not that kind of care. When they talk about care, what they're talking about is management. Like you are cattle on a farm. They manage us. That's their idea of it. That's why I'm talking about earlier, that kind of intellectual elitism, which is really just a disguise for eugenics. The ideological point of view that they consider themselves better than everybody else. And if you get killed off during the process of them managing the systems of the world, well, that's just, you're just another number on a book. You're another one of the 215 that has now been acknowledged. There probably could have been more. These are just the ones that they're acknowledging. So now the indigenous peoples over there now have got an opportunity, that they've got some more evidence to push for some form of culpability, some form of justice, in a similar fashion that there was just a tiny little bit, a tiny little spread of information, little data points here and there in what Cummings said in his little speech, his little movie script pitch, that indicated that potentially some of the main names like Bojo and Handicock could be culpable for a minimum corporate manslaughter. Potentially, as lots of people have been talking about over the last several months now, potentially facing something akin to the Nuremberg trials. Because some of the things, some of the information, some of the evidence that has been available over the last year plus, I feel, and you could say this is just my point of view and I'm biased and whatever, but I feel there's enough there to begin a genuine criminal investigation. And potentially you're talking thousands just within the UK alone. And if you spread it out globally, you're talking tens of thousands, possibly up to 100,000. People who have been damaged or even lost their lives because of this situation based on policies enacted by these mathematically illiterate politicians, supported by their mathematically illiterate journalist mouthpieces, spokesholes. So, light me smoke again while I think about what to say next after that. Because if you let that sink in, it is sort of like, well, hang on a minute here. It's like that really good classic bit of comedy. Hello, Jeffrey K. Clevermind. Is that meant to be a kind of play on Jeff C's name? Maybe. Well, hello in the chat anyway. Rumford, hello mate, hope you're well. Rumford Chimpanstein, hello, thanks for joining in. All the good people. Sorry, I was distracted by the chat and scrolling up and down. And I was scrolling the StreamYard chat room, sorry, not the actual chat room that you've all seen on the screen, because I forgot that there. Right. One I wanted to mention, and hopefully this as well will sort of make sense of why I'm sort of putting it together in this way, because hopefully you'll see how this all sort of interlinks, and I will put the link to this in the chat in just one moment. Let me open the screen share first. This is Odyssey platform, because I really don't think you get away with putting this up on YouTube, not unless you're prepared and willing to have your channel struck for, daring to try and air content like this. But this is, I don't know if this is Hugo Talks himself at the March video in this, or whether he's just uploaded content that's been sent to him by other people. But I've seen at least 2 different people feature footage of this little group of nuns. So I'm not questioning it like just Hugo Talks uploaded this and therefore it's suspect because it's only one person showing a selected clip or whatever. No, there was multiple people showing that this was happening there on the site, multiple different camera directions and from different channels or whatever. Yeah, this is on Odyssey from Hugo Talks, and the title of it, I think, was Would a Nun Lie to You? Yeah, Would a Nun Lie to You? And in this, let me see if I can just, I know you won't be able to hear the audio is the thing, because I can't. Well, let me try putting this into the other browser and see if it will actually let me show it. Let me see if I just find the baldy guy wants to photobomb at the back. Yeah, what a thing to do. Yeah, anyway, I was trying to find a clip where you could see that there's not just one nun, there's like about 4 or 5 of them stood outside their premises. I don't know if it's an actual abbey or whatever, it could just be office buildings. I'm sure that the more attentive to detail people out there may be able to actually sort of locate where this was on the day, like what particular group of nuns it is and stuff like that, because I'm sure you could figure it out if you're meticulous enough to look through the information and the like geolocating of it. Well, it seems to be working okay, so let me just try swapping the screen share over to this. And yes, I am fully aware that this might give me problems on my channel. I keep looking at the wrong browser, dummy. So I'm making schoolboy errors. I kept clicking on the one tab thinking, why am I not seeing it? And I was clicking on the tab for the other fucking browser. This one, share audio. Right, okay, seems to be. Well, I was expecting it to be funny with me because it's on Odyssey, but it seems to be all right with it. I'll try playing this so you can hear the audio, because I think, you know, the most important thing about this is what she says. Again, first-hand witness knowledge, gnosis, direct gnosis.
You're created in the image and likeness of God. You were born free. Don't let them take your freedoms away from you, and protect the children. No conditions let them have that vaccine. It kills people. I've known since January, I've been asked to pray for 50 people who have died. I've been a nun for 28 years, and all my life I've never been asked for anybody to pray for anybody who's died or even been injured by a vaccine. Only once in 2015, a young girl. But since January this year, 2021, 50 people we've been asked to pray. 50 people we've been asked to pray for who have died from the vaccine.
In London?
In London, in England, and in Ireland, a couple of people overseas as well.
God bless you.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Well done, well done.
Have courage, we're praying for you.
Helps if you unmute yourself. Yeah. So, as he's labelled, as he's titled the video, nice and simple. Would a nun lie to you? Do you think a nun would lie to you? There may be some situations where you might be suspect. Is it a real nun? That kind of question. Maybe they've got an ulterior motive, whatever. But what's the likelihoods of that? Given the situation of what you see and what you're being presented with, what's the likelihood that that's a lie? As I say, I've seen at least 3 different coverages of this same situation from different points of view. This video is quite close of just the one nun saying what she's saying, but I've seen other camera angles, other people showing the same scene where you can see there's a handful of nuns stood outside their premises talking to the crowd as they're walking past. If you want to be really paranoid about it, you could say, like, oh, well, you can't trust it because you're just seeing it on a screen. You weren't there. You don't know if it was real. It could all just be fake. It's all a show. Yeah, probabilities of that. And if you base the everything else you're doing and the rest of what you're thinking of doing on that presumption, you're going to find it very, very difficult to exist in life in general. Yeah. Yeah, the media likes to put out a load of porcupines. The media is an illusion machine. The dream world that is presented by the majority of the media is literally just that. It's only real if you believe in dreams, if you're living in a dream world. But that doesn't mean all media is fake. It doesn't mean everything you see on a screen is fake or incorrect or some kind of shill agent. Everyone's a shill now, baby. That's the truth. That's not the truth. Not unless you're being really, really, really loose with the definition of the word shill. Yeah. It's just, it gets to the level of insanity, which is what they want to try and imply, which is why they spend so much time primarily on character assassination. Yeah, that's, if you notice, you'll see a lot of that round at the moment. You know, there'll be people with that kind of a commentary saying things like, you know, oh yeah, but look at him, he's ugly. Oh, he talks stupidness. Oh, once he said the word blah, 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 therefore he must be all mental. You know, I'm being deliberately silly, but you get the idea. If they cannot deal with the evidence that you're showing or the argument that you're presenting, they can't counter the logic of your argument, they resort to ad hominem. I was going to say ad hominem. Ad hominem. Yeah, the ad hominem fallacy. They attack you, the messenger. And the main way they do that is character assassination. You know, so there'll be a lot of that kind of suggestion of things like, oh, the only people that out of the hundreds of people that turned up at that protest, they were all suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Yeah, that's the only reason they were there. Really, mate? You think that, you know, you look at the pictures, you think everybody in those pictures is all suffering from paranoid schizophrenia? Really? Where'd you get your qualification from? I'd love to see what medical institution is giving you that kind of knowledge base, such that, you know, just with a broad sweep of your brush, you put all those people there under that same banner as being mentally ill. Therefore, any questions or points that they raise are automatically dismissed due to some form of psychosis. You need to, you know, look at that stuff for yourself, and you can pretty quickly and usually fairly easily get a gauge of whether somebody is saying or doing things because they have some form of problem or issue or potentially psychosis. Yeah? And they love to seed those people into environments where they think they can pollute the information. Right? Somewhere like that big protest group, there would have been COINTEL operatives in amongst that protest crowd trying to disrupt it or divert it in some fashion. You would have had some who would have been saying things that were so over the top that they hope, you know, the public will look at them and go, oh, crazy tinfoil hatter. Or they would have had some people that were outright confrontational and seemed hell-bent on being destructive or violent. You know, then they can point and go, oh, look, they're all just crazy, violent anarchists. Another misuse of the English language. But, you know, that's the shit they do. That's the bullshit they keep playing or trying to play. But it's now, if it wasn't for the real world bad or detrimental effects of all this shit, I would have just got a really big, you know, a bucket size load of popcorn and sat and just enjoyed it like it was some kind of crazy B movie. Not even a B movie, it's like a Z-list, you know, straight to video like they used to have back in the day. You know, I'm old, folks, you know. Straight to video, the worst kind of crappiest movie script ever, because the kind of things they're suggested in the movie script are so ridiculously over the top that nobody would ever believe it. So it ends up just going to the bottom of the pile kind of thing, you know, straight to video. Hardly anyone ever watches it. And even those people who do, you know, sit all the way through it at the end of it, are like, what the fuck did I just watch that shit for? They're going to have to go and, you know, scrub my brain for a few hours to get rid of that crap. What's that classic meme clip? You have made us all dumber. Everybody in this room has suffered and become dumber because of your shit. Yeah, gotta laugh. Gotta laugh at it. Because part of what they like to play as well is they want people to go a bit crazy. They want you to get a bit mad. There's a very famous musician who once said basically this. I can't remember the exact quote, but they like to prod and poke. They will tweak your beard and they will prod you and poke you and try to get you agitated and get you mad. Yeah, mad, by mad he means angry. Yeah, it was John Lennon many decades ago pointed out exactly the same thing. They will try and agitate you to force an emotional reaction, so that then they can point at you and go, look, he's just a crazy tinfoil hat lunatic monkey dancing, yelling at the moon. So I have to laugh at it a bit to help raise the energy again, to make sure that it doesn't get dragged off in that kind of direction. Remember to move the chat box from your stream. When did you send that message? An hour ago. Sorry, Taz. It took me an hour to catch up to your message. I'll take it off screen now. No, I did eventually remember to stop screen sharing the chat box and actually show the other stuff as well. Let me find some amusing memes so we can, like I've got into the habit of doing recently, we can raise the energy a little bit. Before we move on, I'll say thank you to everyone for joining in, giving us your attention for a bit. Please send good wishes and energy out to Peter. It's reality chat. He's not well at the moment. It's not the alleged bullshit, whatever. As far as I know, anyway. Last he messaged me. He said he'd been required to take a test and it come out negative, but he's not been well, so that's why he wasn't here Wednesday. And I don't know if he'll be back online for this Wednesday either. I haven't heard back from him, but I will find out if I can. But please, send him some well wishes, and hopefully we will be back on Wednesday. If he's still unwell and not able to make it, then I might do what we've done before in the past, where I'll start at one on my channel and it will be called something like Not the Reality Chat. Yeah, I like calling it that because it's a throwback to the Not the 9 o'clock news, which was one of them TV comedy shows that used to be quite fun. I did enjoy it when I was young. When I was younger, I'd probably still laugh my ass off at it now because some of the stuff on there was really good. But yeah, that was when you could actually get away with, being a bit more honest with your audience, and you could take the piss out of each other without everyone getting fucking offended. If you can't laugh at yourself, what the fuck are you doing? We're all a bit stupid at times. We all do dumb things every now and then. That's another quote. I can't remember who it's from. Everybody is entitled to be totally mad for at least 5 minutes a day. Something like that. I can't remember the quote properly. So anyway, I'm rambling. Thanks, Tony, for putting memes in. I'll go through some of them and I'll check as well. There might be some others. They all look like shit. Don't fucking say it. It is a bit like, funny that, and it looks quite similar to the muzzle of a sheep, but you'll see the sheepdogs around somewhere, the TSG. They are just like sheepdogs. Excuse me, nurse, can you tell me what this is? Yes, sir, it's an arm. Are you sure? Do you have qualifications to, say that that's an arm? I'm not sure I trust your qualifications of telling me that my arm is an arm. Yeah, definitely. Nice and simple. Toxic masculinity. 43% of boys are raised by single mothers. 78% of teachers are female. So close to 50% of boys have 100% feminine influence at home and 80% feminine influence at school. Toxic masculinity isn't the problem. The lack of masculinity is. I endorse that message. I agree with that message. I couldn't say for certain about the statistics of general knowledge. I'm guesstimating they sound about right from my personal experience and the kind of stuff I've looked at. I've had an interest in the education system and all that kind of stuff for a long time. Yeah, it sounds about right to me, and I agree. And when you compare it to the average male for, I was going to say this generation, but it's not just this generation, it's this one and the last one at least. There is definitely a lack of, I want to add an adjective of genuine masculinity, real masculinity. I'm not talking about the macho bullshit, the warrior programming. And I'll use the word warrior in a Hollywood production sense. There is a thread called the Princess Warrior Programming, and it's the kind of Disney indoctrination stuff. They used to, they've changed tack now, because now everybody has to be unisex, because you're all going to be transformers in the near future. You're all going to be transhuman or post-human. But when I was younger, and certainly I think up until maybe last decade, the mid-noughties, they started to steer away from this kind of thing. But there used to be in place a constant warrior and princess programming for every generation. The boys were meant to grow up to be good little soldiers, and the girls were meant to grow up to be good little princesses. And that was seeded into the cultural media. So it reinforces and indoctrinates every generation to pursue that expectation. But they were manipulated and controlled archetypes. They were not genuine archetypes. They were fake archetypes of masculinity and femininity. They usurped those concepts and turned them into something that they knew would be damaging long term. And it was for a purpose which we're at now that they're going for the post-human bullshit. But yeah, in my experience, there is a severe lack of real masculinity. It's nothing to do with being a macho man. It's nothing to do with being the hero out of the kind of typical action movie, all that kind of bullshit. That is that bullshit warrior indoctrination that they put on young boys. You'd be a good little soldier, all that kind of shit. Being a warrior is nothing to do with being a soldier. They are two radically different things. Being a warrior is true to the archetype of masculinity. Being a soldier is not. Being a soldier is just being somebody else's tool. That's not to denigrate the sacrifices that all those people have made in the military, etc., that are labelled as soldiers. I'm talking about the mental constructs, the archetype that they define as soldiers. They are literally just tools. As Kissinger put it, they are pawns to be expended in the great chess game. Military men are just dumb pawns, I think was his quote. Yeah. US moves to rebuild relations with Palestinians by nuking Israel. I don't think they will. I'd never. So I think a virus has just escaped. Dr. Fauci, will you fuck off and die? We don't want you anymore. You're making us cry. Sorry. Just thought I'd digress into a bit of a parody of the parody. I note as well, I mentioned this to the guys before we was going live. I was looking at some footage. Now they've been rolling out this thread again about the China virus. This is, again, a misdirection for the public, because rather than the public asking whether this thing is even real in the first fucking place or whether there was any need to define it as a pandemic, no, instead, now what they want the public to be worrying about and talking about is whether China created a bioweapon. In other words, it either subconsciously and tacitly justifies the claim that this thing is real and existent and is an actual genuine threat. And it also misdirects people, like I say, to worry about, like, oh, you know, did it come from China? Is China attacking us with bioweapons? Oh, we need to start a war with China. We're at war with China. Ah, yeah. But I was looking at some of the news articles that are talking about that thread again, about, like, you know, more information has been found saying that it's come from the lab in Wuhan in China. And the one thing that really stuck out to me was, like, all the signage is in Chinese and English. And if you go and have a bit of a look around to, like, some of the news articles where they show a bit more of this footage that this image is from, I think, because there's a bit where there's, like, a few of these police or security guards, whatever they are, and they're sort of lined up along the road as if they're, like, guarding the building from the media. You know, the media's there taking pictures for the photo op and whatever, and all these guys are standing, like, to attention outside. While I was looking at that footage, I noticed, yeah, all the signage is in Chinese and English. Even at one point, they showed a clip of some of the buildings, and on the side of the building is security cameras, you know, typical kind of security camera mounted on the side of a building. And the logo printed on the side of the security camera, there was a logo in Chinese, obviously for the manufacturer or whatever, and in English. So English is the second language in China. English is the world's common language. All their stuff is in Chinese and English. Why? Why that Wuhan Institute of Virology? Why do they feel the need to put all that signage up in English? Is it because they've got a hell of a lot of people coming and going who are not native Chinese, they're not Chinese speakers? So they use the universal language, English, on all the signage and all the important information, so they know, you know, which door to walk through and what lab they're not allowed into or whatever. Sorry, bit of a digression, but I thought it was a interesting note. Yeah, seriously, I can't breathe. Oh, yeah, I think we're back to some of the ones we saw last week or the week before. Let me just check. I know, because there is another room where often a lot of them get put into. And thanks to all the guys for sharing these memes around. I'm afraid I don't have a website or anything like that where I can put up this stuff. You know, this is stuff that's coming off the web, or people are making it, you know, first-hand produced, brand new, hot memes. But if you want, you know, just pause the video after the fact and take a screenshot or something if you really want to grab the image. I'm sure people are quite aware of how some of this kind of modern technology stuff works now, so you know what to do. It's why I don't in general bother saying all the usual things like click like, share, subscribe, you know, all that good stuff. It's because people know about that. Yeah, that's how YouTube works. You don't need to keep repeating it. That's like mind control. You know, repetition is the core of mind control. Yeah, looks like so many cities around the world now, doesn't it? Starting to look a little bit like most UK cities as well. Maybe not so overt with the, like, concrete wall and barbed wire, but there's a lot of places around the UK, certainly in the big cities, in the mega cities, where you get this kind of stark contrast. Yeah. The favelas right next to the gated communities, 5-star hotels and all that kind of shit. Yeah, never a straight answer. Really, this should just have a little note on it that just says Operation Paperclip. For people out there who maybe, you know, think it's all a little bit of crazy tinfoil hatter commentary, you just go look into Operation Paperclip. The information about that is mostly declassified, so it's not like it's some kind of hidden secret info that you have to dig for now. It's quite readily available. you'll find quite a few documentaries on YouTube talking about Operation Paperclip. So yeah, and the Elders of Zion did a really good parody song, Masonic Moon. That's it. If you ever look for that, if it's still on YouTube, it's a really cool song. I played it a few times. I suppose I could actually play it again before we log off. I'm already past the hour. Crap, why did nobody tell me? Somebody should have waved the red signal. You know, somebody should have said, he's got no vaccine. Shut out the window. If you don't get the connotation, this is on an airship. Yeah. That's Indiana Jones getting rid of the Nazi by throwing him out the window of the airship. And while you just enjoy that, let me do a quick search for Elders of Zion, Masonic Moon, if I can find it, and it will screen share. And man, my browser is really slowing down now because I've been broadcasting for a couple of hours, so it's struggling. It seems to have locked up a bit now. I'll give it a moment or two while I blather. That's it. I'll copy that link, put it in the other browser, considering that one's starting to struggle. Its cache is obviously all clogged up. Cool. No adverts at the beginning. Brilliant. Brilliant. So I'll wind it up at this. Thanks everyone for hanging in. I know a few people had to go. They're saying good night in the chat and whatever. Thanks to everyone who joined in the chat. Thanks for giving me, because it was just me tonight. Yeah, thanks for giving me your attention for a couple of hours. And of course, all the good people in the chat and the mods who will share links. And their help is always greatly appreciated. Thank you. Itachi G, hello. In the chat, I'll try and have a quick scroll down, see if I can catch any of the names. Alan, hello, Alan. Thanks for joining in, right? Mac1, hello. China is nowhere an independent state. It's controlled as Russia by Zionists, at least by a century. Well, I certainly agree it's part of the whole big game, right? Yeah, definitely. East versus West is their sort of culmination point they're trying to push us towards, even if it never becomes a true conflict, you know, if it never actually breaks out into a war the way they're always threatening to. It's just that sort of Cold War effect, the constant agitation, the two sides constantly rubbing up together. They have to have that Hegelian process going. So yeah, they've always been couching it as East versus West, and we're getting closer and closer to that kind of situation there. If we're not already in it, yeah, maybe this is the early days of that whole next phase. We're getting close to the last card, as Werner von Braun put it, where they'll start trying to do silly things like playing the fake alien invasion. Anyway, yes, thanks for joining in, folks. Hello to anyone. If I missed you in the chat, sorry. I'm doing my usual, trying to scroll through and ramble at the same time. But thanks for joining us. We'll be doing some kind of broadcast on Wednesday. Hopefully Peter will be feeling better and we'll be back on his channel. If not, keep an eye on my channel and I'll set one up as well. And check out Steve to Goose on Thursday nights for the mystery show. I keep an eye out as well on the Sunday. I didn't get the chance to watch any of it. He did a 10-hour plus, was it nearly 12 hours or something on Sunday? I think people said he was playing tunes a lot. He was playing a lot of music. So, yeah, thanks, Steve. I don't know if I'll get the chance to sit and catch up with all of that, but yeah, thank you. And please don't forget Dr. Rock on Truth Media. Now I'm forgetting the name of it. I'll have to look it up to check it again. And Taz has probably already put the link in the chat room before I've even said it. Post-Truth World. Thank you. posttruthworld.net. Yeah, on the Thursday night as well, usually. But you can also find links through to his previous podcasts. So check those out as well, please, folks. You know, there's lots of people sharing good information and showing that you're not alone, and you're certainly not in the minority anymore. It has now reached the majority. It may not be all 100% on the same page yet, but people will catch up as they catch up. As the classic quote goes, men go mad in crowds and come to their senses slowly, one by one. So we are getting there. Don't let up now. Keep showing them their bullshit is bullshit. You may not get any thanks afterwards, so please don't expect that. Don't expect the public to suddenly turn around and go, "Oh, you were our saviors. You were telling us the truth months ago. We're so sorry we never listened to you." It's not likely to happen, and it's an ego trap. Don't get caught up in that ego trap. Just appreciate the fact that if your message is finally getting through, that will help make the difference that's needed. That's what matters, not getting praise and more that kind of bullshit. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at this. I'm going to play this song out for the end, and then I'll click the end after the song's finished playing. So, make your way to the doors as the music's playing. See you again soon, folks. Thanks for joining in. Let me put it big screen, and I will shut up and play it.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Under the Masonic moon, plans were made by the bankers in the back room. Get the president out of the way and hire Stanley Kubrick. Under the Masonic moon, under the Masonic moon, everyone hoped that the boys would come home soon. One more day and they'll drop from the plane and splash into the ocean. Under the Masonic moon, Werner von Braun and his conspirators got a free ride to the States. They turned Nazi into Nassau. They just couldn't wait. Under the Masonic moon. Under the Masonic moon, plans were made by the bankers in the back room. The owl sees into the night, and the secret will never be told.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. And quality base here. The Eagle has landed.